Ian Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. This is my first opportunity to speak on Part 1 of the Gambling Amendment Bill. And Part 1 deals with Class 4 gambling, which, if you read the Department of Internal Affairs website, Class 4 gambling is not only defined as gambling that occurs in pubs and clubs, which members will be aware of, but it also represents high risk and high turnover gambling. Now, I wasn't on the select committee. I haven't heard all the deliberations, and I have a number of questions, both for the Minister and for members, about the supplementary order paper in Clayton Mitchell's name that has been offered up, and this question of commission payments, which has been the subject of some discussion this evening. I've been trying to get my head around why it is that we need to change the system to allow for commission payments. I mean, I appreciate that venues do need to cover some administration costs, and we have systems already that allow venues to cover for their administration costs. What I don't fully understand, what I actually haven't heard anybody talk about this evening, is why the change is necessary. I've certainly heard a lot of convincing arguments against using commission payments, but what I haven't actually heard from the Minister or from anybody else contributing this evening is, why is this change actually necessary? We already have systems in place for covering the administration costs of venues, and I'm unconvinced, actually, and the closest I got, to be fair, is I read the explanatory note on Clayton Mitchell's SOP, and that was the closest explanation, or the closest thing to an explanation that I got. And what I don't understand is why a venue with X number of machines that has a high turnover ought to receive more in payment for administration costs than a venue with the same number of machines with a lower turnover. I don't understand where the additional costs come from. If you've got a certain number of machines, you need a certain number of staff to keep an eye on those machines. You've got certain maintenance that goes along with them. Having higher turnover, I can't see where the additional costs come from. And that's a genuine question. If Mr Mitchell wants to respond to that, I would welcome that. If the Minister wants to respond to that, I would certainly welcome that as well. I don't understand how the mechanism lines up with the need. What is the problem that this change is actually trying to solve? I would appreciate some support. Or indeed, is there a better way of doing it? Were submissions heard at the Select Committee that described a better way if there are improvements that can be made? Are there other ways of doing it? That's a genuine question. I'd really appreciate an answer to it. Another concern that I found in Clayton Mitchell's explanatory note is that his SOP appears to align the commission rate with what the TAB and lotto retailers receive. Now, there's a fundamental difference between the TAB and people who sell lotto tickets. They are actually, and that is their business. That is their primary source of revenue. They are doing that as a commercial practice, very different to the Class 4 gambling, where actually the primary purpose for those venues is usually they're a drinking establishment. There's some other activity going on, and the gambling is sort of tacked on as an addition, and the gambling is under a Class 4 licence, is not meant to be for commercial purposes. It's not actually meant to generate any revenue for the venue. The funds generated are to be distributed by a charity and to be used for public good works, for all manner of different reasons, but not to make a profit for the venue where they are actually located. So I'm concerned that we're starting to blur the lines a little bit here between the way gambling for commercial purposes operates and the way gambling for non-profit, the raising of charitable funds operates. So again, Very, very happy to hear an explanation of that, Mr. Chair.
Oh, Ian Lees-Galloway.
A good choice, Mr. Chairman.
Well, only just.
I'm very keen to hear what explanation members have for those issues as well, sir. I'm also interested in why the requests made at the Select Committee for more active and proactive harm reduction activities were not taken up and not included in the legislation. I am not a prohibitionist. I am not a fan of prohibition. I don't think it works well, but I am a big fan of harm reduction. And a legalised but tightly regulated market can be a far safer way of dealing with harmful activities than prohibition can. And so obviously harm reduction is vitally important to any system governing and regulating gambling. And there were recommendations made to members on the Select Committee for identification and tracking of gamblers, particularly people who demonstrate tendencies that towards problem gambling, and also prepayment cards, so that people could set, before they start gambling, they could set the amount that they actually want to pay, and that could be monitored by the venue owner. And these were all rejected, it would appear, by the Select Committee. But again, I haven't seen an explanation either in the commentary on the bill or from any of the people who, the members who have spoken this evening, as to why that was. Again, I've heard strong arguments from Denise Roche in favour of including such aspects in the legislation. What I haven't heard is the arguments why either it's not the time, whether the technology is not there, or if the research doesn't support those approaches. Why is it that wasn't included in the original bill? Why wasn't it included at the Select Committee as well? I got the feeling when I was called that the Minister might be enthusiastic about responding to some of these questions. So if that is the case, I'd be very happy to hear some responses to the questions I've asked, and look forward to asking more if the Minister's contribution requires it.
Oh, no, you...
The question is...
Mr. Chairman.
The Honourable Peter